Okay, we're live, folks. This is Ads. I'm here with some very great gentlemen, the one and only, and the great Peter Duke, as we call him.
How you doing?
Creative director with lots of Hollywood experience, and George Webb,
hey everybody,
sitting right next to me, and across from me is our high score, Detroit Dave Underdown.
Hey guys.
And our high score, that's our Michael Jordan over there, Dave.
We got our
MJ.
Our Energizer Bunny.
Yeah, I'm Dennis Rodman.
No, you're
MJ.
You're the microwave.
Aaron Adler.
He's the microwave.
Vinny Johnson off the
All right,
bench.
all right.
Peter Duke went to a rally last night, actually, in Beverly Hills, and you texted me this morning, Peter. I did see a good chunk of your Periscope that you did, but I want to thank you for coming on my channel earlier this year, Peter. Actually, a few weeks ago, that was a very well received interview. I think it got one dislike and something like 50 or 60 likes. So you're on par with George Webb on the dislike ratio, Peter. But how have you been? How was the rally, or what you been up to recently?
I've just been doing my podcast with Tracy Connors, and I don't know if you guys saw it, but Hunter Biden released, or there was an audio drop. Here, let me check my audio here a little bit, because I think I'm a little hot. Anyway, we went over an audio file of Hunter Biden, and it's very interesting because it sounds like some kind of a demonic possession or some kind of a invocation, Crowleyan kind of invocation. Say again?
I am Deimos. Isn't that the line?
I am Deimos. Yes. And Deimos was a Greek god who was the son of Ares, also known as Mars, and the brother of Phobos. And in the audio, he talks about how at the end, he talks about how he can't go on without his brother. So it's kind of dark and ominous and spooky, and probably appropriate for Halloween, but certainly another strange element of this election season, where every day it just seems to get stranger and stranger. And you guys have uncovered a lot of odd stuff too. They're at the I can't remember the name of what you're calling your newsroom.
We're the studio now, Peter. So we were the hour before, but this is the neighborhood news studio. I just put the Entropy chat in the live chat. If people want to do super chats, we actually got our first live chat, or excuse me, super chat on Entropy. I think it was on our last stream, actually, when George and I were talking. We got a nice $20 or $22 donation there from BEA 27. So if people want to use Entropy for uncensored discussion as well, they can do that. But what we've been working on recently, George?
Well, just to pick up what Peter said is when Dave heard that I am Deimos, he immediately said to me, "That's the Rockefeller Fund. That's the Rockefeller Fund." And I said, "Oh, Hunter's saying something about the Rockefeller Fund." He goes, "It's not just the Rockefeller Fund; it's the Obama Rockefeller Fund." And I'm like, "The Obama Rockefeller Fund?" "Yeah, it's the Obama Rockefeller Fund." And I'll let Dave tell you about it. But it just shows you perspective of having 5 or 6 people in the room. Each person hears a different thing when they hear Deimos. Dave went right because he has an investment background with Munder. He immediately knew Deimos was Rockefeller. He immediately knew it was for Obama, so which I thought was amazing, because what I hear Hunter saying is, "I've got protection. If you guys want to throw all this on me, I've got protection with Obama." So why don't you go ahead and give us that?
So, well, when I was just looking it up, I wasn't familiar with the Deimos character. I watched your show with Tracy and your guest discussing it. I've been getting into, sort of more of the, historical religions, sort of before the, going back to Egypt and stuff like that. I had no experience with it at all. So it's all interesting to me, all of the myths and things like that. But specifically with this Deimos, I was just looking because I knew it. I feel like whenever they do stuff like this, there's always sort of a double meaning to it. So when I saw that this Stephen Heinz, it's a different spelling than the Heinz like Chris Hines and John Kerry's wife, Teresa Hines. He was the president of this Rockefeller Brothers Fund that was started in 2000. It was the Barack Obama. It was sort of his launch, it appears. He was still the state senator in Illinois. Just sort of going through with the history of the Rockefellers. With John's dad was a student at Loomis School with two of the Rockefeller brothers. So just the history. We also did a show sort of studying Sam Bush in Columbus, Ohio, with his Buckeye Steel connection with Percy Rockefeller. So just these, these long historical characters. I feel like everyone sort of knows the name Rockefeller, but I don't think they really know who the players are. They just sort of hear the name and think it sounds bad, and they think of the, Standard Oil Trust and stuff like that, but they don't really know like who the individuals are that did stuff.
So the big takeaway here is Heinz was the money manager in this fund for one of the Rockefellers. I think it was for John D. Rockefeller IV, or who's also known as George O'Neill. So there you go. There's your Demos.
So the name of the fund is Demos?
Yes.
Well,
it's a slightly different spelling, but it's pronounced exactly the same way. It's
spelled like this.
Show them that way.
Demos, so like demos.
But it has the accent over it, so it makes me think that it could be pronounced the same way.
Yeah, that's funny. It's kind of like a little wink, as George might say.
Just
because Demos without the I means democracy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But Deimos with the I means the son of Ares. So it seems to have this kind of double entendre. But when you start to dig into occult symbolism, they do that a lot. And I think that, I don't know if I mentioned that to you the last time that I talked to you, George, but that does seem to pop up when in a lot of the occult stuff that I read. When you start to read about Crowley and all of those kind of crazy guys back in the 1920s and the 1930s that were doing all of this occult stuff, they did like to name things in a way that was a wink, as you would say. So that seems to be status quo. It's part of their steganography, the way that they communicate with each other in order to let each other know what they're up to, is that they do that kind of stuff. So that wouldn't surprise me, Dave.
When I see, I'll come to you in a second, Dave. When I see an I added to the Dems, I immediately think, of course, of all the money that we spent on surveillance programs like Operation Blackjack in the Congress with Joe Biden. And the eye was the eye in the sky. These were the small nanosat satellites. So when I think of what they actually invested money in, was in surveillance technology that supposedly was going to get Osama bin Laden, which was a fake, which was a bogey, which was a boogeyman. And then they rinsed that back through the eye money. They rinsed that back through the DNC, the Demos. I immediately thought of that when I saw that the eye wasn't there. I said, oh, that's Project Blackjack. But that's me. I always think of things in terms of nanosats. Dave, I'll let you do the second round.
Oh,
here.
Just the other connection that we had with this Demos was this Heinz character that was the founder of it with Obama. He was he worked with Joe Lieberman in his campaign for Senate in Connecticut. We all remember him as being the Democrat that kind of went between independent and Democrat. But he was also part of the Three Amigos, which was a group that David Petraeus had coined, as a nickname for Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and Joe Lieberman. So again, getting into these, weapons deals, throughout, through NATO and all that stuff. That was all, that was the group that was really handling that. So that was another connection we had.
Yeah, so there is a kind of a wink here also to David Petraeus and his three senators that he controlled on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Intelligence
But also
Committee.
the states they're from, I think, is important because they're Connecticut, South Carolina, and Arizona, which again tie back to a lot of the things we've been studying in those three states.
How do you think? Excuse me. How do you think the next week or two is going to play out, Peter? Based on what you see with the election and who's winning the race?
I'm going to give you the same qualifier that I've been giving everyone when they ask me that question. All things being equal, I don't think that there's any chance that Donald Trump does not win this election. The question is whether or not all things are equal. And, I got into journalism in 2014 when I was working with Chuck Johnson, and we were covering a Senate race in Mississippi that was between a Tea Party candidate, Chris McDaniel, and the establishment Republican, Thad Cochran. And in that election, the Republicans hired Haley Barbour, who brought in his son, Henry Barbour, who went to black preachers in Mississippi, told them that Chris McDaniel was a member of the KKK, and then paid 20,000 black Democrat voters $20 each in white envelopes with crisp, clean $20 bills in them to go vote for the Republican Thad Cochran because the Tea Party candidate was allegedly a member of the KKK. And so that election was stolen.
What year was this again, Peter?
I think 2014.
2014. Wow.
Yeah, and my partner at the time, Chuck Johnson, managed to get a recording of one of the black pastors who had been screwed by the Barbers. He was supposed to be paid, and he didn't get paid, and he was angry about it, and he freely admitted to someone who recorded the conversation that he had been screwed without realizing that that was a felony. And we published that story, and nobody would cover it. Chuck was working for the Daily Caller at the time, and the Daily Caller wouldn't publish the story because it was a Republican on Republican story, and they thought that was bad for their brand. Right. So this is kind of my long-winded way of answering your question. I don't know what's going on with these mail-in votes,
Yeah. So you actually started doing your own journalism and adding that to your deck of cards as far as what you can do in 2014. So that was actually, I'd say, quite early because, George, you started 2014 or 2015?
2015. Yeah.
2015. So it seems to me like from what I've read and researched, like 2015 was just a year where kind of hit an apex or an exponential growth spurt. Where just an influx of people came in and started doing citizen journalism like George. But you were actually even earlier there, Peter. What was the impetus for that? Because that was even before the election.
Well, there were two things that were going on. There was the Occupy movement, which I think is ostensibly on the left, and then there was the Tea Party movement that was ostensibly on the right. But they were both coming from the same place, which is, hey, the news that we're getting isn't really what's really happening here. And people are trying to figure it out. And what I've learned from watching George and John and Mark is that you can find out a lot of the information if you just go look in a book. If you're trying to find, and it's slowly but surely coming to YouTube. YouTube is trying to, knock everything out like whack-a-mole. But if you go back to the primary sources, if you go back to the original, there are thousands of journalists who have written, well-cited, well-executed documents over the last, 200 years about all of the stuff that's been going on, and it doesn't get made into it doesn't ever make it to the New York Times bestseller list. It doesn't ever get made into a Hollywood motion picture. And it takes a while after you start to get into it to realize, oh, well, that's on purpose that they don't ever publish that stuff. They don't ever make those movies. But the initial event, to answer your question, was things weren't adding up. And when you start adding 1 + 1 and it's coming at 3 all the time, you have to go back and check your assumptions and try to figure things out. And I think that the biggest mindset change that I had in 2014 was to stop assuming the things that I thought were true. Not that they were lies necessarily, but that they didn't add up.
Yeah.
And
You know what I find interesting, Peter, is like the point at which people lose that trust in a source, right? Or as you say, just assume it's not, not true, right? Or you assume that it needs to be investigated further. Because I think for some people it happens very quickly, and for others it takes a very long time, and then for others still it probably will never happen. So that's just because I know you're quite interested in the psychological aspect behind why people ask the questions they do or don't ask the questions they do. But we've been dealing with our own digital burning of the vanities here with George's book, and not only just George's books, but his channels as well. So, which I'm sure you're already aware of, Peter.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it is kind of a whack-a-mole game. I was telling George earlier that I think that I'm in this category right now that social media managers call super friends. That is, I have less than 10,000 followers, but I have a lot of blue checks that follow me, which makes me moderately influential. And I enjoy that level of penetration into the market, because it doesn't make me too much of a target. I can tell you that yesterday I went to Roxbury Park because I saw a notice that Antifa was going to meet there before they were going to go assault the Trump supporters in Beverly Hills. And so it was surreal, because I'm driving into this park and I'm sussing the whole situation out. I've got PP plates on my car, which means that it means press photographer. And most people don't know what it means, but I was wondering, I hope Antifa doesn't know what that means. And then as I'm driving in, I'm noticing that there's only one way in and one way out. And I'm thinking, do I actually even lift my camera up to my face? Because if somebody sees me taking a picture, it could be a bad deal. And then as I'm sitting there and I'm sussing the whole situation out, George Zimmerman calls me on the phone. And I was thinking, this is just completely surreal, because I'm sitting here. George goes, "How you doing, Peter?" And I said, "I'm sitting in a park. I'm 20 yards away from about 100 Antifa, and I'm just trying to figure out whether or not I should hold my camera up to take their picture." And so that, I don't. I've gone off on a bird walk. I'm trying to remember what your original question was.
Well, that's all right, Peter.
Well, I wanted to pick up on your buried story idea, because I had a piece of information from two different informants. One said the reason why I called him Deep Uranium was there's a series of nuclear power plants strung across between Iran and China. I had another guy, and then I found the Blackberries that supposedly put this deal together with the House Blackberries. Then I had another guy come forward, Deep Blackberry, which is a Biden guy, 40-year Biden guy, who said there's a Russia-China deal in this thing, and Warren Buffett is the guy investing through Russia into this China deal. I didn't know it was Belt and Road at the time, but I gave that directly to Luke Rosiak. I didn't keep it for myself. I gave the Blackberries directly to Luke Rosiak. I gave the Blackberry back to the Blackberry guy with another YouTube guy. I thought everyone was going to embrace this story. I thought Luke was going to publish the Taggart, the Marine who found the State Department Blackberries, or officially marked Blackberries. He said 3 different intelligence organizations came out, so it's got to be the important Blackberries. I thought, no, he waited 100 days. Luke waited 100 days until they could figure out how to, do full spectrum dominance and breadcrumb this thing for months to make him the lead guy. And then the other YouTube channel that had it pixelated the BlackBerry.
Right. And Luke was Daily Caller also, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day. You've got, on the East Coast, you've got the left CIA. You've got Yale and Harvard, right? And on the West Coast, you've got Stanford and Claremont. It's kind of like the West CIA. And that's because that strategy of tension that happens internationally, it also happens locally, right? There's penetration on the left and on the right. Glenn Greenwald resigned famously a couple of days ago from The Intercept, which was the outlet that he founded that was funded by Piero Midiar. And if Piero Midiar isn't a cutout, I don't. Piero Midiar must be the poster boy for cutouts. They actually, there was a book that I read about 10 or 15 years ago called E-Boys. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the claim was that when Benchmark Capital was created, that they were so sure that they were going to be successful that they actually hired a writer when they founded the company. And the guy who wrote the book was the writer that they hired. And the story that he tells about eBay is that they were making so much money at the time that they didn't actually need money from Benchmark Capital. They needed a staff. They needed, the C-suite to be filled in so that they could take the company public. And understanding now that a lot of these billionaires may just be constructs, it makes complete sense that you would take some guy off of the street who meets the specific casting. I mean, I start to think of this stuff as casting now. Elon Musk was cast, Bill Gates was cast, Piero Midiar was cast, Mark Zuckerberg was cast, the same way that they cast somebody in a movie, right? And then they create a story around them the same way that they create stories in movies. And I've gotten off the topic of the Daily Caller Lou Groziak part of it. There's my Big Brother picture. This was on the middle of Rodeo Drive yesterday. It was I've got a couple of different versions of this shot, but there's your eye in the sky, George. It's
I can't exactly see what it is. I see it looks like a big transmission tower with 5G going.
It's a little it's a little trailer. Let me see if I can find another version of it. I've got a lot of pictures here. You can
just pop those up to surveil areas. Give a 360 view of any.
Because they had one at the debate. They had one of those.
They're all over. I mean, they're at almost every traffic light in most cities. Not necessarily on that type of, pole in a trailer. I mean, one of those. They got those on all four corners there. But
please share and like the stream, folks. We are with one of the most censored authors on the internet. Entropy chat link is in the live chat as well. We're here with the great Peter Duke. He's showing us some of his photography here, his asset collection from his investigative reporting
from yesterday on Santa Monica Boulevard.
Yeah, and there were 4,000 or 5,000 Trump supporters in Beverly Hills yesterday. Like I said, there were about 100 Antifa, and I kind of missed it because I was driving from the Antifa park to this event, and then I got a couple of calls and pulled over on the side of the road. And by the time I got there, the Antifa had already gone into the rally, beat up one guy, but as soon as they attacked one person, the police swarmed Antifa. Like, not in a way. I was in Beverly Hills a couple of months ago when Beverly Hills got looted, and the police were standing down. They weren't reacting at all. And yesterday they were taking no prisoners. The Antifa beat one guy up, and all of those guys were grabbed by the police, and they ordered them out of Beverly Hills. They said they had 10 minutes to leave the municipality, or they would be arrested. So they gave them 10 minutes to get out of town, and they left. They were gone. So
one thing, Peter, did you have something first, Dave? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say with the spy schools and the colleges, that's always been a really interesting topic for me, and just learning the history of how the schools were started. Typically, the colonies would have they'd create a church, they'd create a university, and then they'd have sort of the governor or like the government role. And so if you look at like the Ivy League schools, they were all chartered, with the trade companies. So they have those British roots to begin with. And then with more modern schools, like American University, George did a lot of work studying sort of the connections with Burwell, who was a staffer, I believe, for Hillary before, and then she became the president of American U. Susan Rice, she went to American U. There was a Goldgeier was another character that George studied, and then Maria Butina was also at American U. And then being here in the Midwest, there's the history of the Ohio State with Battelle, and then with Michigan, sort of the Willow Run. So there is a lot of areas to look into with these sort of relationships of developing assets and teaching people how to work in these systems.
Yep.
Well, journalism is a big entry point into the intelligence communities, because there, I was reading in one of the books about how Alan Dulles in the late 1940s and early 1950s was hiring anthropologists, and that's because by vocation, what anthropologists do is that they go into foreign countries and they start asking people lots of questions. And that's a great cover if you're an intelligence asset. And likewise, journalists, if you're an intelligence asset, being able to pick up the telephone and call somebody up and start asking them questions under the auspices of working for a specific outlet, or you're trying to get information about a specific story that you're working on, whether or not you're actually really working on that story, is a great cover. It's a great way to get on the inside and get people to start giving you information about things. And it's not necessarily true that you're doing that you're writing a story, right? You may be just collecting the information because there's somebody else who's asked you to go find out that information, and they're paying you for it.
Sawyer,
I was just in response to your story there, Peter. It makes me think that actually might have been an organic Antifa gathering and not one, coordinated by Act Blue or one of the other, school play script writers out there, because it's like, I'll bet all the actual, real movers and shakers in the Antifa movement are all in the swing states right now, that they're all in place already, and that at this point, California is the last thing they're thinking about. It's been interesting, there's very limited vacancy around here in the swing state newsroom area. George is having to bop from one lily pad to the next.
Yeah, we've been staying the past couple of nights, George and I, at the Pretty Boy Floyd hideout.
They renamed it the Pretty Boy ads now. I mean,
well,
you erased all memory.
There's a toy Tommy gun that I was playing with that was already in the hideout, so that was fantastic. It actually made a cameo on McDuff's show. But it's been.
But we're scraping the bottom of the barrel for accommodations, because these Antifa or BLM or whatever have just swelled all the hotel rooms, and the buses are coming in from everywhere.
I thought you were renting like a mansion or something, George.
No, this is not the old days. This isn't the Wisconsin, Maryland thing that we were doing.
They're talking about that big house you were in 2 weeks ago, but you had to get out of there too because people were coming
we
in.
Got a mansion that slept 8 people,
right?
For $175 a night. So that was great because we were saving our Patreon pennies. But then that got filled up, and our whole street there in Toledo was Antifa Row. I mean, it was just one after another after another.
Well, social justice warrior row.
So okay.
During the day, the freaks come out at night, right? But during the day is just social justice row, But
yeah.
I don't know. It's it makes me think that we've seen a lot of out of state plates around here. This is definitely where the action is. So that crew that you saw get run out of Beverly Hills must just not have had the direct line to the chief of police. Soros probably didn't call ahead to tell them that.
Yeah, what we're saying, Peter, is we're thanking you for being our infiltration into the communist networks over in California.
Yeah, it's interesting what Aaron is saying, though, because one of the things that I've noticed, and again, it was something that I didn't actually put 2 and 2 together until I read the book by Eric Hoffer, The True Believer, and that is that when you talk about organic Antifa, or whatever the term was that you used, those people are true believers, right? They actually they got the message, they got hypnotized, they really believe what's going on, and they're ideologues, right?
Yes.
But then there's other levels of human beings that are dealing in the communication, and I call those people operators. And they could be journalists, or they could be intelligence assets. But basically, they understand that the game is about manipulating media in order to get people to move in one direction or another.
There's a certain investigative journalist who's taught us about a lot of those people. If we wanted to name names, we might be able to rattle off.
All right, I got the cue. Well, you did a great show, Peter, and people who haven't seen the Reality OS need to check in on Peter Duke and Tracy Connor's great interview with Jim Hoft, because they go into this Hunter Biden thing that's been kind of dropped on us, sort of like the Anthony Weiner laptop was the last time. And what I noticed with Jim, I mean, Jim he's got a gateway pundit. He's trying to make money. He gets a lead. He wants to publish all the salacious stuff. But again, it reminded me so much of Monica Lewinsky when the Iran-Contra guys were getting pardoned. It reminded me of sort of the Rodney King when they were trying to get the crime bill passed. Not Rodney King, I'm sorry, O.J. Simpson when they were trying to get the crime bill passed. And here we go. No one wants to hear Buffett. No one wants to hear that Chris Wray at King and Spalding was the make it happen guy after he left Enron and looked the other way on Enron. Then he goes to King and Spalding. Is he really the guy that got Buffett the 9.5% or 10%, the $15 billion stake in this Belt and Road deal? That's the narrative they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear that Bob Ulinsky Blackberries are the thing that put the Belt and Road deal together with the CEFC. And every time the story goes in that direction toward the metadata and so forth, I see this. Jim Hoft gets another BlackBerry. Jim Hoft gets another laptop that dropped in from Steve Bannon's magical laptop van.
Right, and the issue becomes, I believe Jim Hoft we all start off as true believers, right? I started off my quest believing that Ted Cruz was the only guy talking about the Constitution that understood what was going on and could make a difference, right? That was my mindset. And then as I got deeper and deeper into it, I started realizing, oh, well, Ted Cruz, he's a Bushy, right? And Ted Cruz is married to somebody from Goldman Sachs. And, I met Steve Bannon because we were both supporting Ted Cruz at the time. And, as I learned more and more things, then I realized that there are these overlapping networks. You have them on the right and you have them on the left. And outlets, the reason that I said that I like being a super friend and I don't really want to be Jack Posobiec with 1 million followers is because when you have 1 million followers, there's a lot of people who are passing you information all the time that kind of expect something. Trump gave a speech yesterday and he said that he could have raised more money than Joe Biden, but when people call you up and they say that they want to give you $25 million and they call you 6 months later, you need to take their call. And he doesn't ever want to feel like he has to take somebody's call. And I think that what happens when you reach a certain level of popularity, if the two things that the globalists find the most troubling about trying to create the new world order are religion and nationalism. And that's because they're both ideological, right? And people who are ideologues are the hardest to change. They're the hardest people to move from one direction to another. And so if you hang on to some kind of abstract concept like the truth, like what's actually happening, as opposed to the narrative, and how can we best spin this in a way that advantages us, then those people become dangerous. And so it becomes a game, right? As you become more popular, how do you maintain your integrity? And I look at guys like Jim and I think, he's he's working really hard every day to try to do that, but it becomes a struggle as you become more popular, right?
Yeah.
When we started talking about Christopher Wray, I mentioned the fact that Christopher Wray's father had been in the Council on Foreign Relations for many years, and that there was an F missing in mice. And Jim wanted to move on to the next subject, and I understood exactly why he wanted to do that at that point.
Well, I want to go to Dave here, Peter, in a second, but people who might not know what Peter's referring to, as Peter Struck talked about the ways that you can compromise someone, and the MICE is an acronym for money, and then compromise.
Money, ideology, compromise or coercion, and ego or energy, MICE.
And the one that Peter and I have found over and over, Mark Kulak, John, in his research, is family. A lot of these people, Bill Barr gets it directly from Donald Barr, etc. But I just wanted to follow this because I think True Punt did cover this. I did have a story about Ray. And this would make so much sense that if Ray's informant and translator for the deal is Carter Page, then everything kind of comes together. All the people who are doing the deals, a lot of the money from Libya and Syria through an oil deal in 2015 with Costa and Belt and Road. All those people, the same people would be planted into the Trump campaign, and they would be the same people that do a winner here. If Trump, we're going to have a dark winner. But I'm going to let Dave talk to that King and Spalding connection. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, with when you talk about the Council on Foreign Relations, that was founded by a guy named Eli Root, and he was basically the lawyer that set up a lot of the business dealings for Andrew Carnegie, and he also was a Secretary of State for the United States as well. So again,
Brown and Root, wasn't he Brown and Root?
And Brown and Root as well. And
Brown and Root was the root of the Manhattan Project, right? That's where all the leaks came from with Brown and Root. Mm-hmm. And it was the progenitor, if you will. Sorry, I'm off camera talking. That's a no-no, but it was a progenitor of Bechtel and Battelle, right?
And Battelle, right?
Yeah. So, but can you do the King and Spalding thing, because you said some interesting things?
Right. Well, I mean, just there's so many. It's like when you follow this closely, like you hear names, but you miss key information about them. And with Christopher Wray, like I knew he was the head of the FBI currently, but I did not ever make the connection that he was worked at King and Spalding, and that they were basically involved in this Belt and Road deal where he was. I think he was representing Rosneft, or that firm was representing Rosneft, and then they had. Bill Barr's, his law firm was also involved in the deal, and they're called Kirkland and Ellis. And then we remember Carter Page was the one during the dossier, the Trump dossier. He was the one that was offering this 9% of Rosneft to Trump. That was sort of his big hook for the Russian collusion angle. So we have all these key characters in here that are part of this dealing with Rosneft, and then the Chinese counterparty, which is CEFC, which again, Hunter Biden was basically the body man for the head of the CEFC. So all these characters just all tie together. The fact that we're
and Bob Ulinsky,
just
where are the BlackBerries?
Ignoring these connections that that every news outlet in the world isn't studying this and trying to get some kind of story together to educate people.
Thank you. Okay,
go ahead, Aaron. This is our Lord of the Flies conch, in case any of us need to be shut up. George just has to take the ball from us, But you guys are talking Brown and Root, and you forgot Kellogg.
Oh yeah,
Kellogg, Brown and Root.
Sure.
Right, and that's the company.
Yeah.
And so I don't really know.
Is that related to Kellogg? That's Pence's.
Yeah, the security director. He is related through the chain.
There's a lot to discuss about him.
So Kellogg Brown and Root was the original. That's where the original leaks were to the Russians for the A bomb out of the Woolworth building where I used to work, which also had the SEC after the World Trade Centers came down, and it was Bob Mueller's dad was renting the space. I mean, you just can't believe these connections. So go
I
ahead.
want to read this.
The F is family. The F is
It's the that should be the name of your next book, George. F is for family.
okay. It won't be. I needed a better F anyway. So
I want to read this little bit from an audience of one, being George, and then the broader audience here too about Kellogg. In 1970, Kellogg moved from New York City to Houston, Texas. Enron, and of those, we're going to get Internorth from Omaha coming down to Houston, which is probably going to be a thing. 1975, they completed the move by relocating the development lab. The 1970s saw Kellogg become the first American contractor to receive contracts from the People's Republic of China. Kellogg's international work expanded with the major ammonia complexes in China, Indonesia, and Mexico, as well as LNG, George, as well as LNG, liquefaction plant in Algeria, and 2 receiving terminals for LNG in the United States.
Yeah.
What does LNG stand for?
Liquid natural gas. Yeah. And this is what Hunter Biden is saying. Again, this is a tape that's dropped to Jim Hoff for, hey, Hunter Biden's talking about his business partner. One's a Chinese spy. The other guy's the richest man in the world. Well, the richest man in the world is not named Yi. He's not the head of CEFC. The richest man in the world is either Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos or all 3 of them. And this is where I say, when Hunter Biden says richest man in the world, I don't think of Yi at the 323 billion, right? I think of Buffett, Bezos, and Gates as the consortium that was. They always take these guys, like you were saying, they play these roles, Peter, as these super smart rich guys, but they're actors, right? If you steal stuff from other countries, you can't put it in a bank, so you have to put it through an oil company. And it was Enron, and now Enron's new name is Loop Petroleum. I can't remember what the name of Enron is now, but you just change the names every once in a while. Right.
What's also interesting that I was thinking about too is that the conceit of Kathy O'Brien's book Transformation of America is that the guy who rescued her, who wound up becoming her husband, a guy named Mark Phillips, that he in the first chapter of the book, he sets the story up as the fact that he was an intelligence asset that was working on mind control programming, and he had been set up by an American intelligence agency to be the front of a company that was partnered with the People's Republic of China in one of those initial deals. And that the guy that was his partner, whose last name I think was, I want to say Houston, was one of these mind control operatives who was a degenerate human being. I mean, in order to be a mind control operative, you have to be a degenerate human being. And that what happened was that he went over to China to sign the contract, and Chinese intelligence approached him and gave him material on his partner and said, your partner that you've been set up with, we want to do this contract, but your partner that you've been set up with is a really bad guy. And they gave him a bunch of material that proved that his partner was a really bad guy. And they said, and his connections go all the way to the White House. And this was in the 70s, I think, late 70s, early 80s when this was happening. And they said, we want to sign this contract with you, but the only way that we'll do it is if you buy out your partner. And he said, well, I don't have the money. How would I buy out your partner? And they said, don't worry about it. Just make the deal and you'll have the money. So he came back to the United States, according to his story, and then bought out his partner. And then he wound up rescuing this woman. It's a noble white knight story. Like I said, I don't want to believe it's true because it's the darkest book that I've ever read, but I think that the construct of the American intelligence operator going over to China to make a deal and then getting fed information by Chinese intelligence in order to break up that deal is a very interesting kind of architecture.
Yeah, well, it makes me think about Hunter Biden kind of in that same role. Hunter Biden's this kind of guy who doesn't understand what's going on at the higher level. He doesn't know it's Buffett. He doesn't know it's Bezos. He doesn't know it's Gates. He just knows that he has to go with Chairman Yi to Moscow to visit Putin to get 9% of Rosneft. He doesn't know who's that Qatar and Glencore are the two real buyers. That Rosneft is selling this out to Mark Rich's company. Mark Rich, has had, since his death, has had other proxies run the company. But you also have Phillips with Mark Rich, going all the way back to when the company was called Phillips. So this is a Glencore deal through and through. I hate to say bad Mossad, but I'll go ahead and say bad Mossad. If you want to throw in Chabad Lubavitch, I'll let you do that. But I'm going to go to Dave.
Not as easy as that.
I'm going to go over to Dave here and just talk a little bit. I'll wait for the camera about Phillips and Glencore.
Well, I wanted to circle back to Houston to kind of talk about those connections, because I do think they are really important. People remember the movie Charlie Wilson's War with this character. Her name was Joanne King Herring.
This is the Julia
Herring, and she was
this is the Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts character, but what really happened was it was to set up Operation Cyclone in Afghanistan, which we remember sort of being the Zygmunt Brzezinski operation, with developing the Mujahideen to fight the Russians, to basically keep peace in the Middle East through a defensive coalition in Afghanistan was the concept. But her family, her backstory is very interesting too, because she was childhood friends with James Baker, who was the Secretary of State, during the Iran-Contra dealings, where Fletcher Prouty talks about the check on covert activity is the National Security Council, which consists of the president, the vice president, the Secretary of State, and the head of the Department of Defense. So his argument was that because that group all claimed ignorance during Iran-Contra, that there was that is the check and balance on clandestine activity, and that because they claimed ignorance or didn't know, that means that no one is controlling that activity. Let
me come back to you. Yeah. See,
that just means that the people in the White House are not controlling it. That doesn't mean that it's not being controlled.
Right. It's taking all the money for Iran-Contra, and who knows how many trillions of weapons went through Iran to nations all over the world, right? Who knows? But you have this problem where you have this pile of money at the end, and you can't put it in banks, otherwise it can be seized. So what do? You have to put it into shell companies, no pun intended, like Enron. And she's, American people believe this. Julia Roberts, sashayed down there in her evening dress, and she waltzed through the lobby of the Houston bank, and then she put in these $10 trillion into Enron, and that's just how the story goes. And she woke up a little bit later and had a cocktail party, and said, "I think we should attack, and start a war in Afghanistan." These are the movies, like you said, Peter, that are cast to try to get you to believe these fairy tales, but they don't match the metadata at all.
Right.
And Miss Herring to present day as well. Harry the Greek has been doing a story on this mysterious Robin Longoria woman, which is linked to the Lisa Page child trafficking with regards to the international adoption services. Robin Longoria, her mom is Herring, Julia Roberts' character.
Yeah, and I just want to say this, that you can see how Bannon did this, or whoever the cover services officer did this. They said, "Well, tell me a star that's like a woman from Texas, because we can't use Herring anymore." That we already used that one for that movie. And somebody came forward and said, "Isn't the Tony Parker's wife? Isn't she from Texas? From Desperate Housewives?" "Yeah, that sounds great." "Well, what do you want to call her?" "Well, there's Batman. You can't name her Batman. Let's call her Robin." "Okay, Robin Longoria." Because we've been trying to find this woman that has all these child trafficking cases, 43, nowhere to be found. She hasn't been arraigned, arrested, nothing. She served 0 time, right? But it's this replacement. Yes, Batman was the first deal, and now Robin is the second deal. They're trying to launder all this stuff that they've accumulated from mining, especially.
Well, think about it. Think about it as casting, George. It's like you've got to have a redheaded Russian, right?
Yep.
You need to have a blonde Texan.
Yep.
Right. It's these are all comic book characters, right?
Yeah. I was just gonna say we actually and Harry didn't know if this person was real for a while actually before he linked her to Miss Herring. So.
There's two Russian women that George and I have been chasing all over the internet trying to find out if they're real, right?
Krylova and Bogacheva.
Krylova and Bogacheva. It's like, try to find them. They don't exist.
Yeah. Every once in a while, they'll add some muscle to the story and actually go hire an actor to play them. But for the most part, they exist on paper. Go ahead, Dave.
Right. I was just going to say, too, with the history of Enron and Herring's connection, it was a merger of Houston Natural Gas and Internorth, which was a Omaha-based gas company. That's Buffett. But the reason I say that is because we're studying this, Belt and Road, which is basically a way to transport energy around the world and control, LNG pipelines. So the idea of having these refineries and being in the energy business is a really important concept for them.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead. Aaron's got something to say. I was just going to say it is the way that energy people think. It's like, hey, wait a minute. Now that we're done, we've taken all the assets out, all the gold and the uranium, and now we just need to frack. I mean, now we just need small reactors, coffee makers along the way every 200 miles on the Belt and Road, and we just need to frack. And we need pipelines now. So we need peace now. We need Sinohawk and a whole bunch of helicopters hawking the line now. We need pipelines. Yeah, Warren Buffett is the number one guy who sends petroleum by train. Primarily because he's the guy who also then puts in the pipelines because he knows it's half the price or a third of the price. So we're just seeing this Belt and Road deal with Hunter Biden, and no one is bringing up this Warren Buffett angle, the Enron angle, the money laundering. Nobody.
Also, with the history of resources, we just talked about the Kellogg, Root and Brown being the firm that did a lot of this exfiltration, but they were also affiliated with a company called Dresser Industries, which was one of the Harriman's businesses, which when we studied the history of Buckeye Steel in Columbus, they were you see that there's a Bush, E.H. Harriman and Sam Bush were partners, and then later Prescott Bush and Avril Harriman were also associated. So there's this 120-year relationship of these business partners going back that long.
Aaron wants to say something.
Go ahead.
I got the ball. I get 3 questions.
Okay, here we go.
Peter's the genie. Okay.
All right. Okay, Peter. They're coming right at you now.
Peter, have you ever worked with, professionally or otherwise, anyone like George Webb? Or is everyone like George Webb? Is it always like George Webb? Or
that's a really weird question because I don't think I've ever met another human being who's like George Webb. I mean.
That's good. If there's two,
I've met tall people before. I've met people who attach themselves to something like a dog on a bone before. But George, his focus on his purpose, I think makes him fairly unique in the world. And he's the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps going and going and going. When he wandered away from Los Angeles over to your neighborhood, I was immersed in that George Webb world for like 8 days, and then he went away, and I had to have a little withdrawal, But I realized he was off in another direction, and he'll come back. We put a lot of stuff in the can, so we have to figure out what to do with that now.
I'm glad I asked these questions because it's like, and that's going to happen to us too. Now he's here and he'll go back to you, and we're, having those same dynamics, which is great. What do you think is the most important part of George's and all of our Osprey research? Is it the energy deals and the fact that he's caught the post-Soviet world's energy and weapons dealing better than anyone else? or is it the media blackout that has covered and even seems to be a part of the energy deal, or is it both together?
Well, the reason that Tracy and I started the Reality OS is because we talk about the question that you're asking all the time, but not just specifically to George, but to all of your work, you know. And the idea is that if you look at that pyramid on the back of the dollar bill, which you know I assume is the bad guys, but it also represents something that's kind of a universal idea, which is that in order to build up to awakening, you know, you have to scaffold it, right? You have to make your way up the pyramid. And Tracy and I have been actively trying to figure out, and that's part of the reason that we've been talking to Pat Moyse. Besides the fact that Pat Moyse is a expert on the occult and kind of esoteric knowledge, he's a certified hypnotist. He actually understands, and Pat Moyse and I have very, very similar kind of learning experiences in that we wanted to understand how people are manipulated, what it is that's causing them to believe something that they shouldn't believe. And I think that the first step is really that awakening to the point. I mean, the Q people call it the Great Awakening, and they make it this big mysterious thing. But at the end of the day, coming to that moment when you think, oh, all of these things that I've learned my whole life may not necessarily be true. What we talked about earlier is, you know, that different people do that. We didn't talk about why they do it. And I think that the reason that most people don't do it is because they're afraid. You know, if your whole life has been structured over the idea that if you got a degree at college and you got a good job and you got up at 7 a.m. every morning and you went to work and you did what your boss asked you to do, and that you were loyal to your family and you paid your taxes, that your life would be a good life, and then somebody comes and explains to you that whatever it is that you were framing your entire reality on isn't really true and doesn't really exist, then it makes your motivation for doing things, it really messes up your motivation for doing things. So what I've noticed in, you know, if I was going to kind of categorize the knowledge that you guys are uncovering, it's esoteric in that it's secret, right? And it's specific in that it's applied to certain domains. And because it is specific and applied to certain domains, it takes a certain amount of scaffolding, which sounds like a Masonic term that comes from education, where you have to kind of build up to it, right? You're talking about Kellogg Brown and something. I haven't heard of that before, but I'm thinking, is that like Brown Brothers Harriman? Is that the same Brown? Kellogg is the cereal guy, but he's also involved in these kind of, I think, Chautauquas, which were kind of a cult, kind of a health cult that was going on in the 19th century. So all of those little ideas come into my head, and then I go off into a Dave Underdown, rabbit hole. And rabbit hole, by the way, isn't a cult term. It's something that the practitioners of the occult, going back to like the 13th and 14th century, would describe as their pursuit of knowledge was going down a rabbit hole. And in fact, there are old 15th century drawings of magicians with rabbits going down holes at their feet. So this is kind of a long-winded answer, but I think that we have to wake people up first to the idea.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I have feedback on that, and then I get my third question. Part of this experience, back when we had a real channel a week ago or whatever went on.
Well, this is a real channel.
I know, it's been interesting to be, on this side of the camera and dive into the analytics of, your channels and stuff. And certainly one thing that I've been struck by, now meeting George and working with George is his analytics, which I don't know if you guys have interacted, about, but it's the cat lady thing. The cat lady thing is a little more of a generalization, but me and Attican and Dave represent about 6 to 8% of Georgia's audience. It's a lot of people 50 and over, 60 and over. And to the extent that they, and then I take the other people in my life, my parents, other people in the community who, like you're saying, like, they hear that, oh man, the whole world you've lived has been an entire, facade. You're basically living in Pravda world for the last 50 years, and they're like, la, 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 I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
What's Pravda mean again?
Pravda means truth, of course. I'd love to talk to Peter about the Soviet Union and media in the Soviet Union. That'll be another episode.
There is no post-Soviet Union. We're in it.
Yeah. But like, I hope to the audience, and certainly, George and just his work and everything, while many, many, many people of the 50 plus generation probably have a defeated attitude when they realize that everything's been a fraud and everything's been fake. For guys like us, it's like, bring it on. I think we're young enough and excited enough that we can just like,
I get to respond to that.
Yeah. It's like, oh, great. Everything's fake. Cool. We're excited to attack the fakeness, right? And if it's like, if I was 60 or 70, be like, oh crap, I raised my kids already and it was fake.
Let me do a counterpoint to that.
I am 63 and I do have those feelings. So yeah.
Yeah. So I always say a cat lady is just a grandmother who has no longer has grandchildren because they overdosed. So those overdose situations where you've got Pakistan, ISI under the color of law with state sponsorship bring in fentanyl and their kid dies or their grandchildren dies, you take somebody who didn't believe, you take somebody who didn't want to hear it before, they want to hear it now. What killed my grandkid? Because the cat ladies, which isn't really descriptive, the people without grandkids is the better description, are without grandkids because they OD'd. Right. And that makes them the most dedicated. You want to talk about somebody who is dog on a bone with drive and single focus, monomaniacal focus. That's those folks. And we depend on those folks for all that we do. And just to Dave's thing with the rabbit hole and all that, Dave, to me, is kind of like this huge terabyte, back in the day when terabyte was a lot, database.
A petabyte.
Yeah, it's
yeah. Don't say that. The Q people are going to strike us down.
The Q people. Here go the Q people. But I use that to do pattern recognition. So I go, oh, I get it. He says Sam Bush is always the same place Harriman is. Sam Bush was small arms. Harriman's the railroads. I get it. You go down the railway and you mine 10 miles either side of the railway and you get the nickel and the chromium and all the things that go into weapons, small weapons. And Sam Bush is the guy at the end of the Harriman line that's using that mineral. The Belt and Road is the same thing. No one has come to the American people and explained the Belt and Road on how it's a big mining and fracking operation. And that is the scaffolding we need to understand the Bobolinsky and the Hunter Biden Blackberries and the Belt and Road and the CEFC. And no one's building that scaffolding. Everyone's just saying, oh, Hunter is a crackhead and he's got these two Russian Oconus lures, and I'll let Dave get in here.
Yeah, so. I was just going to say, with going back to that history with Sam Bush and E.H. Harriman, it was also the federal government was the one that gave them the contract for the ordinance. So it wasn't like they were just cowboys in the Wild Wild West. They were partnered with the federal government to do these projects. And then we talked about Brown Brothers Harriman. That was I know people love all the occultic stuff and the skull and bones and, the velvet wallpaper and coffins and all that intrigue. But the reality is, if you look at Brown Brothers Harriman, it was a three-way merger between the 16 founding partners. 11 of them were Yale graduates. They were all skull and bones. When you look at now with guys like Devin Archer and Chris Heinz, they were at Yale together. I don't know if they were skull and bones, but you even throw in a character like Steve Mnuchin, who I think is a skull and bones guy, and he's the head of the Treasury. So, I think they try to, pollute booby trap these, stories of being this occultic stuff. But the reality is, if you look at, you get past the, the coffins and the initiation stuff. They're doing. I mean, they did the Brown Brothers and Harriman and Sullivan and Cromwell. They did the deal with the Germans. With Fritz Thyssen, with the Four Horsemen of the German medals. I mean, so the idea that partnering for arms with governments for war. I mean, when you ask why we go through all this, it's because selling war is the most profitable business. If you can sell arms to both sides and you get to do the cleanup.
Well, it's not only profitable, but it gives you control. I got turned on to a movie a couple of weeks ago that I watched that I highly recommend. It's you can watch it on YouTube. The whole thing is on YouTube, called The Princes of Yen.
And I saw that. And the thing is that with that Brown Brothers Harriman, it was a merger of a British firm. I think the guy's name was Lord Shelburne, who was Shelburne, who was basically the head of the English banking system that had partnered with the American group that was doing the financing with the Rockefellers, with Standard and their banking assets, and they were basically supporting the Nazi war machine. And you can watch the documentaries like The Rich Man's Trick, where they talk about a lot of these relationships and how there was a British interest, there was a Dutch interest, there was an American interest, and the idea that we were partners with Russia for these war efforts, and then go into this complete reversal where we now have a Cold War for 70 years, where there are our tribal worse than the Nazis to begin with. Like, these are the stories that we're kind of told, but when you really step back and think about them, it's how do you go from partnering with somebody to defeat the Nazis to now our partner is actually even worse than the Nazis and the greatest risk to the security of everyone.
Well, because if you go up the pyramid, the Nazis, the New Deal, and the Soviet Union were all different divisions of the same program.
Yep. Well, yeah, just a different hat, just a different color. So you get your third question.
I get my third question. I do want to say before that, I didn't mean anything disparagingly to any of the 60-year-olds in your audience. I thought I saw some comments that I was beating up on them or something. It was more to say that no discouragement here, team. Yeah. We are pumped and ready to fight for decades ahead.
I have noticed that the demographic of 45 to 60-year-old males has just shot up since I've featured George. But really, just that demographic in general, though, as well. I started out kind of UK. And now it's more so U.S. and so shout out to George for that. Really.
Well, and also shout out to George for partnering with you, Addie, because George recognized really quickly when he met you that there was a great opportunity in order to move this knowledge into a younger demographic, and you're the vehicle. So. Thank you.
Wow. I never actually vocalized that to him.
We were just sort of hoping he understood that.
We were just putting him in over at the charrette out.
But thanks for saying that, actually, because we've been taking about 2 weeks to try to get that into him. But yeah, you just said it in about one sentence. That's why
appreciate that, Master.
It's all casting, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Organic, authentic casting, but still.
I wish I looked like Brad Pitt, but
So my third question, and then I may even listen off air because I'm gonna have to get back to work here in a second. So considering George and his career and the work and Osprey Nation and everything we do here, we are 2 to 3 days away from the election. Our team has discussed a Tuesday night, kind of election coverage with maybe a map on the whiteboard and breaking down the swing counties and just doing the best CNN impression we can do, which I think would be better than CNN, but. Any recommendations from you, Peter, as a very influential part of our Osprey Nation, or anybody else in the chat? Now's your chance. Anything you'd like to see out of us or George in these very important last 48 hours? We don't want to go chasing Mark Rich too much. He's been there for decades. We got 48 hours. What can we do? Maybe go after the Joe Jorgensen voters? I don't know. Any recommendations from you?
Great question.
I'm trying to think of something that I can say on a live stream, because there are things that I'd love to tell you not on a live stream. On a live stream, one thing that I think everybody should pay attention to is Ollie Alexander has been he has inside information on all of the internal polling on all of the campaigns. And if you join his it's not a Patreon. He's got his own thing going, but I don't think it's very expensive to get in. I think it's $5 or $10 a month or something. He's putting out 2 emails a day right now that have moment by moment breakdowns on all of the internal polling, and I think it's the most important news source if you actually want to know what's going on the ground right now. And so, if one of you guys subscribes to that, then you'll be able to take advantage of that. And I highly recommend to any of the people listening, if they want to know what's really going on polls, turn off the television and listen to Ali, because Ali has his finger on everything right now.
We were thinking of.
I was just going to add that there's metadata and actually where the candidates send their family members.
Yep.
If you look at where Trump is sending his family members, it's to Michigan and Ohio, and a little bit to Pennsylvania, but
Wisconsin too.
Wisconsin too, but I mean we've seen them up close and personal now. A couple of times, and I've been able to ask 2 questions, not just one, of Donald Trump Jr. I was able to ask 2 questions to Eric Trump, right to his face. So, and it helps me talk. But we're in the thick of it. I mean, and it's funny because southeastern Michigan also is a bellwether. One of 3 bellwether counties. The one just to the north of us is also, and that's Washtenaw. And then Oakland, where Dave is from, is the 3rd. So we actually have residents from the 3 swing counties in Michigan. And then if you look at the Ohio, it's right over the border, 1 mile, just that way. Literally, we eat in Ohio most of the time. So,
well, since you basically, moved into my home, temporarily or whatever, George, should we tell your audience about?
Now everybody's going to think I'm pocketing the Patreon. I'm not. I haven't moved into your home.
You're moving around.
I moved in here. Okay.
Whatever to call. But were you going to do the same day registration? Is the audience going to get to experience that with you?
Yeah. Oh, you mean moved in here? Yeah. Yeah. I think
Michigan. Because you're a resident too. I mean, you're saying we're resident.
Yeah. So we changed the plan. I was going to go back to Wisconsin to vote, but I will be voting in the state of Michigan, as it were.
Well, thanks to our governor, and the Secretary of State, both Democrats, and our appreciated voting.
So you can just change your residency like that?
Well, no, same day registration.
Same day registration.
Same day, you can walk in and register, and same day registration.
This gets back to the beginning of this broadcast when you asked me who I thought was going to win. This is so jacked up to use a expression from the 80s. I'm dumbfounded by the fact that you've just decided that you're going to vote in Michigan instead. It's just crazy.
I live here now, so I mean that's easy for me. But
so you're both voting in Michigan.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing: I don't want to tell people when I am, because literally I have people out there that literally call the FBI, they call the state police, they send out, bulletins and so forth to try to get me arrested. This has happened. This has gone on for 4 years.
Sure.
So especially when you go to official places. So I'd rather do the registration. But yeah, I sued CNN here. Because this is now where I live, and we'll be suing YouTube from here on Monday. As soon as
if we take a picture of your toothbrush,
I started to read a couple of your lawsuits, George, and one of the ideas that I had when I was reading it was, and it's getting back to what we were talking to Aaron and Addie about scaffolding before, is that you scaffold in your lawsuits really well. Yeah. You start at the beginning and you go dunk, 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 and I was thinking, if you did this with all of your stories, if you dealt with all of them like it was a lawsuit, and that you had to lay out the case for the jury, that would not be a bad way of approaching organizing your content.
That's actually we were talking about earlier today, what we're trying to do very soon here with George's books, just having like a 7x7, 7 minutes each, or around there time wise, just so people can get the whole thing in like under an hour, really, or about an hour.
Right. I think that that's a good idea, because one of the things, George and I have been shooting all this video, and the idea in my head when I started was that it's a 90-minute movie, but how many 90-minute movies has anybody watched lately? Compared to the number of other things that they've consumed,
Right.
it seems like the shorter the idea, then the more chance of saturation that you've got. And it might be better to make 12 7-minute movies than one 90-minute movie, right?
Yeah, that's probably what it's going to be. And we're also doing with the annotation that Addie adds, which is the check, which is if I say Iran Contra and he says, what's Iran Contra or whatever, make sure that I have the scaffolding. I know you know what Iran Contra is, but I'm just saying for some of the things, what's Pravda?
Yeah, for like easy to absorb for like a general listener, not like an Aaron Adler. That's not our target market. We're looking for like just people can absorb very quickly who don't know the terms and then how they fit together dynamically.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits of working with Tracy when I do the Reality OS, is that Tracy's always cognizant of the fact that people who are watching us may not have any background material on what we're doing. Now, for people who do have background material already, though, that becomes a little bit infuriating, because it's like, oh, I've already heard this. Like, why am I listening to that?
Yeah, that's why I try to do it quick and then move on, just a quick...
Right. So to that end, I mean, one of the things that I recommend that people do is if you go onto my LinkedIn page, I've written an article called "The 7 Things That Everybody Needs to Know in Order to Make Their Creative Project a Success." And the first 2 things are, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? And then how are you going to measure that you are a success? So that's 1 and 2. But the rest of it is positioning, which is an old Procter & Gamble formula that goes for this audience. The name of the product is a category that the product competes in that delivers the major benefit of the product, unlike the major competitor's product. So there's 5 things that you need to define, which is the audience, the name of the thing that you're doing, the category that you're competing in, the major benefit, the thing that you're doing that nobody else in the world is doing, and then who are you actually competing against. And in this YouTube, streaming media space, the people that you're competing against are the other people who are vying for the attention of your audience, right? And so keeping those things in mind when you're producing and you're, even as I'm sitting here, the reason that I brought this up was because Tracy's always thinking, oh, Peter talked about this. Are the people watching this, do they understand what he's talking about? That having that kind of mindset is really good if your audience are people who are uninitiated, to take a term from the occult, right? Because the reason that you go up the pyramid and things get smaller, that the number of people get smaller, is because you've already consumed the lower parts of the pyramid, which allow you to move up towards enlightenment, right? So jumping around the pyramid winds up becoming a difficult way to build a market. So
I just want to say, I'll make a closing remark. I don't know if you guys can keep going, but the thing that's awesome about this little family, this Osprey Nation or whatever, is that I think the initiated, and if I can say, one of the initiated or whatever, I feel I know George's story really well, and I know a lot of others in the chat do. All we want is for more people to be onboarded and to be initiated. The last thing that this group of people wants, and this is a shout out to all the 100 or something people watching, is like, we want you to understand. I will take 2 days and stop myself from learning and moving forward to help other people onboard themselves, because we understand the importance of the real crowdsourcing that's going on here. And that's just, that might set us apart or make us different, but it's who we are. I'm done. You're up.
I just wanted to say, as far as onboarding is concerned, Addie is going, I'm rewriting the books. I'm also putting it through Grammarly too. So Peter turned me on to Grammarly. But Addie's also a great editor, and he's great. He's a great writer, and he's actually had a lot of authors, I didn't know this, where he's punched up or checked their grammar and so forth. So all my books are going to be rewritten, not only with me rewriting it, not only with the new Bobolinsky and all that and the things that have come in, but also with Grammarly and Addie's annotations. And we're just going to do 7 minutes, and Addie's going to stop me at any time where he goes, wait, that's not quite clear, or wait, where did that come from? That's a pillar that you built, but in the air. Where's the support beam there? And I think it is 12 7-minute films, Peter, and that is going to be for every book. We're going to do 1 Minutes to Midnight first, because that's the one that was the rocket bestseller that got banned in a week. And also the lawsuit. We're going to go through the lawsuit as well, because I think people don't realize how much effort went into that, first of all, but how that kind of lays it out too, in a very sequential way. So,
right. Yeah, I mean, the one thing, Aaron, that we always have to be cognizant of and aware of is that there is a reason why initiation and compromise happens in secret or discreet societies, and that's in order to maintain loyalty. And loyalty serves more of a purpose than just controlling the people that are in the organization. It keeps out the riffraff. And one of the things that George probably is the world's leading expert on at this point, who's still breathing, is that you can be approached by people who say that they believe in what you believe, who want to help you, that want to do the things in order to support you, and those people wind up not having the best intentions. And so, it's noble that you want to take 2 days out of your time to teach a bunch of people, but the one risk that we all have still, and I don't know if there's a good way to get rid of it, is that people can show up that say that they believe what you believe, and then they can compromise you or create problems for you in the future. And that seems to be the ongoing methodology for disrupting. I've talked before about what I call cat poop sushi, but like you take a movement like Q, and then you throw in a Pizzagate thing, right? And then what happens is that the entire world decides that the valid information that's been included in that scandal is as viable or as has as much veracity as the nonsense information, and then it just gets thrown off as a conspiracy theory. And oh yeah, that's not what happened. So got to be careful. And again, I don't know how to solve that problem at this point. It's still something that I'm working on, and I'm not sure. I think that part of the reason the Masons don't call themselves a secret society; they call themselves a discreet society. And I kind of like that. I did watch. I was a member of an organization that was created in Hollywood called Friends of Abe, that was started by Andrew Breitbart and Gary Sinise, and it was about 2,500 Hollywood professionals, many famous actors, many famous producers, many famous directors, and eventually it got compromised. And it got compromised by people who were in leadership position. I mean, they managed working themselves into a leadership position and then wound up compromising the whole organization. And so this is just my word of warning to kind of leave this. And I'm not trying to, be a downer, but be careful. That we have to figure out a way to get people to show us their bona fides. And I'm not saying that we got to put a sword to their neck, but true believers are easily led, and they're easily led astray. So that's my word of warning.
Dave, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I was just saying, when you were talking about George with his lawsuits and how you, liked seeing it presented in more of an organized fashion, we've just been basically doing almost like jam sessions here. I mean, we don't really prepare the show or have notes or talking points. We just kind of go. So, there's obviously pluses and minuses to doing it in that format. From my perspective, like when you're talking about sort of the different levels of understanding, that's something I feel like I've kind of struggled with my whole life, because I've had a lot of sort of personal experiences where they don't seem quite right, but there's not enough there to like seem like there's anything wrong with it. But as you kind of go through and like learn the different characters, it's very helpful to me. One of the organizations I feel like everyone should study, which I think has roots to now and also going back, is a group called the Georgetown Set, which was a group in Washington D.C. that was like Alan Dulles, the Harrimans. You had Katharine Graham, who was the head of the Washington Post, which we have now. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post now. He's in talks to buy CNN as of 2 days ago. So a lot of these old kind of OSS intelligence into the media, who's doing the compromising, who's sort of organizing these sort of, big picture message campaigns that they want to send people down, you can track it back, and they're going to be the same group that's, going to be involved in a lot of the stuff with, Kennedy assassination rolling into, into LBJ, all that stuff. I mean, it's all in there. You just have to know that. And that's the problem is I feel like when you make these really strong associations, you want to be 100% right that you're at least in the right area to even be suggesting it. So, we know that that's part of what our, investigation is to sort of explain these mysteries of, of our culture that we've had for, our lifetimes, but going before that, unexplained things, not really understanding the intentions or drives behind what these things were for. It's all part of what we're doing. And so, I think there is obviously a risk in, talking about this kind of stuff, but at the same time, it is our history, and we're just trying to, really understand what happened. And
yeah, George describes his Miami of Ohio, cork and yarn. He used to use that as a metaphor all the time. And he said that, if you've got 8 different colors of thread that are all going between the same 2 pins, then that indicates something, and I'd love to see the 8 pieces of yarn going between the 2 pins visually, or logically in a way laid out so that you can make those associations, Dave, because the thing is that I think that the people that we're up against are really good at destroying the evidence, right? They're really good at destroying the witnesses, but the metadata still is all there.
Yeah. So, Peter, what we're going to do is with a banned book, we're going to start with the most popular banned book, 1 Minutes to Midnight. I've already rewritten the first episode. Addie's already going to proofread it. We're going to do it. We're going to put it out. And by doing this 7 minutes at a time, it'll let us edit the next 7 minutes and the next 7 minutes because we'll have feedback from the audience of what people didn't understand. We have to take the risk that people will try to twist it. I worked for 3 months on sleeping on somebody's couch once, only to find the door locked when I came back with coffee. I've learned the hard way on this with the infiltration stuff. So
yeah, that was my point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we should have a big sign that with those 5 letters just flashing every time somebody makes an allusion to that. But something, But anyway, I think everybody knows who we're talking about, and so you do have to be careful. And hey, the BlackBerry is still that person still has pixelated the BlackBerry. So there still are people who are trying to throw roadblocks. No matter what, we're going forward, and that's what we're doing.
All right. So if you want to use any of that footage that you have on that hard drive, just go ahead. Okay. And if you need any of my help on that, let me know. And you said that you are coming back to LA though at some point, right?
The morning of the election, the day after.
Okay.
Where I'm flying out there.
All right.
So we're gonna pick it up right there. Now I got the chosen one, YouTube's chosen one, to do the editing. He's an editor too. So
yeah. Speaking of that, Peter, I know we talked about it yesterday. I don't know if you want to talk off camera just about our your stuff what's going on. But regardless, you can find Peter Duke's YouTube channel, The Reality OS, in the description box below. Do you have a Patreon too for your?
No, we don't have that set up yet. We'll probably get that set up this week. We have some PayPals out there, and thank you to anybody who sent me money. There are a couple of people who have sent me money. I sincerely appreciate it. But Tracy and I are just trying to figure it out. Tracy runs a big company, and this is not her full-time job. I'm doing this when I'm not doing other things. And so, we're getting organized slowly but surely. We're getting set up.
Excellent.
But thanks for asking. But Tracy and I will be on later on the Reality OS. We stream it on my Periscope, her Periscope, the YouTube channel, on Facebook.
That be Peter?
Say again?
What time are you guys broadcasting today?
I think it's 4 o'clock your time. Which is
4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If people want to check that out. And I actually did an interview with Tracy Connors as well, both on my channel and on my pandemic podcast with Shrimpsu as well. Also in the description box is Peter's Twitter. I highly recommend that people go and follow his Twitter. It's probably your biggest social media presence, would you say, Peter?
It's the one that I pay the most attention to. And, I again, because I'm a super friend, I can probably get away with saying things that a lot of people with 1 million followers can't get away with saying.
Right.
And I also, it also auto deletes after 2 weeks. So pay attention to me, because I'm not leaving a trail for people to come crucify me later with. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much for chatting with us, Peter. Thanks to Detroit Dave Underdown and the big man himself, George Webb, as well. And you can see the Kennedy picture in the background there, folks. This is Addy Ads. And we will see you all next time. Stay frosty.
Bye now.
Bye, Peter. Thank you.
You're welcome.